From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
Thank you, Steve. Happy Thursday wherever you happen to be on the Gold Coast, getting ready for a massive supercars round or at home as normal. Thank you very much for watching. Lots to get to this evening, including an update from Queensland and the bushfires that we started talking about last night. Fires that may well be burning in deep forest all the way through to the new year. Now, my fear for that is it's going to be very similar to what happened in New South Wales before the Black Summer bushfires there. Will it combine with other fires? Obviously, time will tell. The photos in the Courier Mail have been unbelievable to see today. We're talking about the area of the Western Downs, a city particular, or the town of Tara, which is to the west of Toowoomba. Well, people went back to their homes today, and we understand that 16 homes have been lost. Imagine what it is like to return back, not even summer, and your home is completely gone. And 2 people, of course, have already lost their lives. Here's part of the local reaction today.
No one needs to be a hero saving their home. It's just things, as long as you can walk out with yourself and your kids.
It's going to be a couple of very tense 24, 48 hours.
Yeah, I'm really scared.
It's obviously stressful for the community. Sorry. I'm tired.
Long nights.
Not knowing what I was coming home to. And, you know, whether my animals would have survived. You just have to keep battling along and doing the best you can.
We love you guys. Sadly, we all know that they will not be the only ones that will suffer under the pain of fire, which of course is sadly part of what we have to expect living in this country, but it is always shocking. Another reminder to everyone, pay attention. When you're told to leave, leave. If you can, put together that bushfire plan. May even think about the go bag with all of the key documents and photos, because, God forbid, it happens to you. But most likely, it could. Laser-like focus for us, as always, is cost of living. Why? Because it is what is affecting the most number of Australians. It is bigger than any single political issue that we talk about on this show or any other on any other channel. People being able to afford to eat, sleep, go to school, take medicines. When inflation keeps going up, that gets harder. The government, as I have said every night and will continue, is in a position to make things cheaper by dropping the fuel excise by 25 cents. It'll cost them $3 billion. They already have a surplus of $20 billion. So they can have their $17 billion for bragging rights. Can we have $3 billion so we can actually have a little money in our pocket? Because, as you know, it keeps going up. Inflation yesterday showed us that for 2 months in a row, it started to go back up. No, it is not at the absolute height, but still, that number is the best part of 3 times above where the Reserve Bank wants it to be. Remember, petrol alone has gone up 19.7% in the past month. That is up the best part of 5% in 1 month. Australians need relief, yet of course the government, the Prime Minister, they will not do it. Electricity, despite the fact that, renewable energy will be so much more powerful, there's more of it than ever before, your electricity price is through the roof because it all needs to be built. I've said it for 10 years. This is not about climate denialism, it is about a denialism of the cost of transition. That's what you're paying. Gas, transport, bread, dairy, insurance, rent, housing, all of it above the national average of 5.6. But of course, none of that being discussed by the Prime Minister when he was there having the full golden treatment from the President at the White House. And I understand the close relationship that always should be marked, celebrated and tightened up between Australia and the United States for the most obvious of reasons. But could you think of a more tone-deaf moment than some of the stuff that you've seen in the past couple of days, while literally 3.7 million households have had trouble putting food on their tables? The Prime Minister's clinking glasses on gold-trimmed plates with millionaires, billionaires and the rich and famous, his real comfort zone. Meantime, here in Australia, the Reserve Bank boss has said yet again that inflation is such a problem that, despite the fact that she's handpicked, and the expectation of being handpicked was that she won't raise interest rates, if inflation keeps going up, if petrol keeps being the best part of 20% inflation, they have to raise interest rates. Will it be the Melbourne Cup one, or will it be the last one of the year? Who knows, but here's what Michelle Bullock said in Canberra today, and none of it makes me feel good.
Can I just ask, in regards to yesterday's figures, do they make it more likely or less likely, in your view, that interest rates will go up in the short term?
Senator, I'd say we're still analysing the numbers at the moment. I wouldn't like to say more or less likely. We're still looking at it. It has confirmed what we've been saying all along, as I said, that the persistence is in the services side and the goods side is responding. But I think that's all I'd say at this point.
There's also more signs of where people are cutting back as things like petrol go up by 20% in just 1 month and the government does nothing to make it cheaper. And these come from the Brisbane Times today. They show us the huge numbers of people that are dumping their private health insurance. Now, of course, this matters because it means more strain on the public system, but it also means that there are people who may well end up getting penalised who earn over $50,000 a year because they have dropped their private health insurance. But you can see here that there is the best part of 10% of people who have just walked away. 1 in 10 people from their private insurance. But this one frightened me. Have a look at this. March, April, May and June. What you can see here are people who have been missing their payments on their home loans or their credit cards. The blue is for a credit card, the yellow is for the home loans. Let's focus on the yellow here for a second. That, of course, was just a couple of percent. It got to 10%, it's on its way to 15%, and now it's on its way towards 20%. The number of people who are missing credit card payments, and we all know the consequences of that. It means, of course, the amount you don't pay, compound interest, means the overall bill increases. About 10% in March, 40% of people in April, basically the same number in May, and about 35% that were missing their bills, and that was back in June. The numbers have got worse in July, in August and September. Yet, of course, none of this being discussed by the Prime Minister. Again, I understand the need for a state visit. I understand the need for our Prime Minister to be at the White House. But can you think of anything more tone deaf when I repeat, Food Bank today, or Food Bank this week, as we showed you, 3.7 million Australians in the past year, households, have been unable to put food on the table. Yet there was plenty of food on the table and champagne and giggles on the gold-plated Eagles today. Meantime, of course, the Prime Minister is completely immune to what is happening, not just because of the wages that he has, but all of the people who make decisions in this country. From a backbencher of the opposition, the worst performer in the Senate, all the way through to the Prime Minister. Remember, these people have got their biggest pay rise in a decade. Oh, and just to rub it in about other people's money, now I know he's not the first, but still, you're paying for the Prime Minister's dog to fly on VIP jets. Ridiculous, right? But 3.7 million households can't put food on the table. Outrageous. Now, I've long been saying, and certainly this week, that I hope that the good people of Queensland see sense and get rid of one of the worst governments they've ever had, one of the most tone-deaf premiers they will ever have. And that election is the best part of 12 months away. Now, I've got to resist the temptation, like I did during the last election, to go hard and to talk about it every night. It's a national show. There's only so much people care. But I certainly care about the people of Queensland, and they deserve a better government and a better premier than the one they currently have. Well, we get some signs today that it may well be 4 years too late, but still, they are on their way towards losing the next election, that being the Labor Party. Courier Mail had a YouGov poll today, and this has been huge news and is a portender to the potential loss of the Labor Party. Today, this poll showed that Anastasia Palaszczuk is now no longer the preferred premier, and the number of people who are undecided about her leadership is in single digits. So people, a majority of which have walked away from her. The question now is, are they willing to go to the opposition? That's why, of course, you get this from the premier today.
Have you ever thought about handing the reins over?
No,
Why not?
because I'm committed to my job.
OK. Because I want the job, I should have the job. Despite the fact that she has lost the confidence of the people of the state and hopefully loses all power for the Labor Party at the upcoming election in Queensland. But can we get into some of the data here? Have a look at the trend lines, all the way from the sky-high preferred premier numbers that were there during the COVID pandemic, because she kept you safe, Well, now, It's been dipping. It's come back a little bit since April, but David Crucifulli, who started at about 24%, is now in front as the preferred premier. However, there is a significant number of people who have not made their decision yet, but still, you can see that the trend is not Palaszczuk's friend right now. About some specific questions about whether or not the premier is out of touch. Well, doesn't matter who people are planning to vote for, 55% of people, so you've got to say there's some Labor voters in there, they agree with the proposition that she is out of touch. 54% of people say that she has run out of ideas. And when the pollsters ask people to use one word to describe the Premier, here's some of the ones that have come back. The nice ones are committed, leader, competent, does a good job, but then dishonest, do not trust, poor performance, incompetent, not good, disappointing. Doing okay, average, adequate, pushy, unreasonable, scornful. The primary vote right now is way down on where the Labor Party was at the last election, and remember, they didn't get that much of a majority, so a huge fall away matters. Now also, they've changed the voting system so that it is now a full preferential system in Queensland, which means, as always, add the Greens together with Labor, well, you can see that that's the best part of 46%, which is why you shouldn't be writing them off, but the LNP at 41, presumably, a lot of the preferences of places like One Nation and Qatar would get them over the 50 and there would be a change of government. But, it is all a year out and the Labor Party spin machine is incredibly good at not just covering up their own failings that are numerous and we talk about oh so frequently, but also trying to pretend that a vote for anything but Labor is going to be the end of the state, the end of the Olympics. The reality is, of course, as we have said, if health is just one issue you care about, it has got worse and worse and worse under this government. Don't fall for the spin, dare I say, flush them and don't leave a trace. Now we are at the end of the second week since the referendum when Australia was very clear. It is now going to be the best part of 61% to 39% that Australians did not want constitutional recognition of Indigenous peoples and a voice to Parliament. The Prime Minister knew this for months, but he pig-headedly decided to put the two questions together, so the result was what it was. The Prime Minister, of course, was so confident that the case of yes would win that, remember, he didn't even vote on referendum day. You see, he was voting about a week early. But we still have the photos, and he still is the guy responsible for the piddling up against the wall of $450 million. But what about the story in the Australian newspaper today? Well, no apparently means no, but not really. Because according to the Australian Today, the Albanese government will consider establishing regional or local voices. Now, this is about a reverse wedge on Peter Dutton because during the campaign he had said that. So they're going to try to turn the negative for Albanese into the negative of Dutton, but still. The Albanese government will consider pushing ahead with local and regional voices after the resounding defeat of the referendum as on a national voice. So you told them in every single state and the Northern Territory, no means no, but they think there's a way around it. Indigenous leaders say the high yes vote in remote communities means there's a clean mandate for the advisory bodies. So apparently electoral results now matter booth by booth rather than seat by seat or state by state. The May budget, by the way, has already got $20 million to push the idea of regional voices. So they've got the money. Will it happen? Watch this space. Asked whether the government was considering pursuing local or regional voices, a spokesperson for the Indigenous Affairs Minister, Linda Burney, said, "We look forward to engaging with Indigenous organisations and leaders across the country in the coming months." Code? Yeah, probably. Now, this is a wild one today that potentially Linda Burney, a spectacularly unsuccessful federal government minister, a disastrous state minister way back in New South Wales, that she could be on her way to being the next Governor-General. And if the Labor Party has it its way, the last Governor-General, because remember, they've got a full-time minister for the Republic. This is a Daily Mail story, and I'll say the most significant part there was one well-placed source has told the Daily Mail that Ms Burney's move to Governor-General had been floated for a while and was openly discussed by some running the failed Yes campaign. I would certainly hope that it is not the case, but wait, watch and see, because, of course, if they're trying to turn a national vote of no into a partial yes, is it not the Labor way to reward failure like Linda Burney and put her into an even bigger job? Let's quickly talk about what's been happening in the Middle East. Of course, it is essentially still the same stalemate that's been there for the past couple of weeks since the horrific attacks by Hamas on people in Israel. For obvious reasons, we're going to get into some distressing footage. When we show you that, I'll speak of it in a moment or two's time. On the Israeli side of things, well, as you can see, there was an incursion using tanks into Gaza. They did it in the middle of the night. Now, of course, I've said it all the way through. If they decide to commit to the full invasion, then there's going to be many hundred, and I mean many hundred, Israeli soldiers that are going to die. But it seems that the Prime Minister wants to push on because he thinks that's the way to kill Hamas.
All Hamas militants are doomed. Above the earth, underground, within Gaza, and outside of Gaza. We are showering hellfire on Hamas. We already eliminated thousands of terrorists, and this is but the beginning.
Now, the joy of the news services that we're able to watch here in Australia, thanks to the Flash app, which is flashnews.com.au, where you can watch Sky News, CNN, you can see MSNBC, Fox, CNN, it's all there, right? Flashnews.com.au. Well, there are two 24-hour news channels that I've been watching all the way through this because they are overtly from the Israeli and the Gazan perspectives. First, there's a channel called I-24. You can find it again on that Flash app or the Flash News service. Links are up at skynews.com.au about how to get to that. Otherwise, I'll make sure that they're up on our socials. Now, their coverage, of course, is about what is happening in Israel and the attempts to hunt down the people responsible for what happened a couple of weeks ago. The reporting that I like from both of these channels is that they have people on the ground with first-hand accounts. Now, obviously, they're taking it from one perspective versus the other, but this is what you can see on I-24.
Right now, I am in the most dangerous place in all of Israel, the Gaza border.
Now, the other end of things is Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera, of course, is funded by the government of Qatar, but they have reporters inside Gaza. Now, for obvious security reasons, there is not a lot of international media that's able to make its way in there, but there is reporting from the ground, from people about what is happening there each and every day. You can take it both sides, grain of salt, all the rest of it, but there's some good frontline reporting. Now, here's the bit where, again, I say that there is the distressing content. One reporter that I have been watching very closely for the past couple of weeks is somebody who's been reporting out the front of hospitals. He has been really trying to talk about the humanitarian side of things. Well, there was a phenomenal tragedy that took place for this man as his family was torn apart in the past 24 hours. This is how Al Jazeera reported the death of members of their own reporter's family.
Perhaps hoping that the tragedy won't touch his own family. It did. Wael Dahdouh's wife Amna, his 16-year-old son Mahmoud, his 7-year-old daughter Sham, and his 18-month-old grandson Adam killed in an airstrike. In a blink of an eye, Wael's life crumbled.
My God, we're lucky that we live here. Again, I-24 you can get on the Flash app. Al Jazeera you can get on the Flash app, as well as all of the other coverage, including our own on Foxtel, on Flash, and all of the other ways that you watch us as well on Sky News Regional. But watch it all, because then you're able to piece together your own picture of what is taking place. And again, I say, thank goodness we all live here. Big rally in Sydney today that had nothing to do with the Middle East. Instead, it was a union rally, and are you sitting down? I support the union rally today because engineered stone has been used in Australia for far too long, and just like problems like with things like asbestos, engineered stone produces similar effects to silicosis, which means once this stuff starts to get into your lungs, it will kill you. There's been a long call from the union movement for it to be banned in Australia. I, again, completely agree. When you know a product is dangerous, it must be banned. We didn't find a way to put tax on lead paint. We didn't find a way to wear special masks. This stuff should be banned. And it looks like it will be in New South Wales, where the Labor-aligned Premier, Chris Minns, is willing to do the union's bidding. And again, I can't believe it. I agree with the union.
I do appreciate that workers in particular are saying The clock is ticking. They're working with this engineered stone today. I'm going to wait one day, see what that report has to say. A large number of people that work in that industry could be permanently affected. So major change is coming.
Now, despite the fact that 2.5 million people in Australia bought a ticket to watch a game of cricket in the past 12 months, Cricket Australia is broke. Now, of course, they make hundreds of millions of dollars out of television rights, but still, they are apparently broke. Cricket Australia reported today that they have $17 million worth of losses. Now, the Australian cricket team ain't disappearing anytime soon, but could somebody please explain to me how, with this much money coming in via television and that many people buying a ticket to go and watch cricket, that they are losing $17 million. But that is exactly what's happening. In the United States, they finally found a speaker. Now, of course, he's too extreme for the left and he's just right when it comes to the right. In fact, every Republican voted for this bloke as opposed to the previous ones when 5, 10, 20 did him over. So the House is now back and open, and they've got about 3 weeks before there's a potential government shutdown. So watch this space. Meantime, former President Donald Trump back in court. He has been sitting in the front row as his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, has been giving evidence against him. This is, of course, in that ridiculous case in New York where, despite the fact that he paid back the loans, despite the fact the banks didn't complain, it's the New York Attorney General that's always hated Trump that is trying to take him to court about how he was valuing his assets while he was getting the loans that he paid off, and the financial institutions never complained. Well, Michael Cohen, who of course has gone to jail and has previously admitted to being a liar, he took the stand and Donald Trump said that should end the case.
What happened is we're discussing a lot of things, but as you know, we have not been fairly treated, and I think people understand that. Thank you.
But remember, he's been told not to say things like that, so he has been handed a $10,000 fine. It's the second time the judge has found him on the wrong side of a gag order. The fines get bigger and then eventually jail becomes the only option. Meantime, again, the Attorney General in New York, who ran on a Get Trump ticket before there was even a case to be made, she says it doesn't matter that they're relying on Michael Cohen. The case is clear.
And there is mountains of evidence which basically corroborate the testimony of a number of witnesses. There is sufficient evidence to prove that, in fact, Mr. Trump, the Trump Organization, and the other defendants committed widespread fraud.
Unbelievable stuff. All right, plenty more coverage at skynews.com.au and lots of our American content as well. If you don't find it on the telly, you'll definitely see it on YouTube. The best website for your news. Make it your homepage, skynews.com.au, and check us out on YouTube. And make sure you follow, like, and all the rest of it on the socials. Quick break, back with more. All debate for the rest of the show. Looking forward to it. And tell me, who do you think is the winner and loser of the week? More in a sec here on Paul Murray Live. Told you we're up for a great debate tonight, and how's this? It's ladies' night on Paul Murray Live. None other than the carry-over champ, as always, the great Pauline Hanson, the leader of One Nation, joining us, I'm assuming from Queensland. I'll find out in a moment, in a second. Holly Hughes, of course, in Canberra for her sins at Senate estimates, and joining us from Adelaide, no doubt on national local government business, is, of course, the Sydney City Councillor, that is Linda Scott. Ladies, hello. Pauline, what's the background behind you? Where are you tonight?
Brisbane.
Ah, beautiful Brisbane.
Brisbane studios, yeah.
There you go.
Brisbane.
We've got the fancy background behind you. Lovely to see. All right, so let's get to
beautiful blue. I love you in that colour, Pauline. It's great.
Look at this. It's just see. That's the thing. See, ladies, they debate differently, right? Like they'll all rip into each other in a second, but we start with the lovely compliments, and then we're going to start kicking as hard as everybody else. All right? Because they've all got their steel caps on. I promise you. Okay. Now let's start here. No means maybe. Apparently, according to the front page of the Australian newspaper today, with the government suggesting, local and regional voices, and the justification for it was because of the results inside certain booths rather than certain electorates or certain states. Pauline, it feels like the beginning of an attempted reverse wedge on Peter Dutton, but let's not talk about that politics. I tell you what, they've got a set of stones on them, haven't they? If they're turning around and trying to say, let's have some voices, despite the fact that everywhere bar Teal or the Australian Capital Territory voted no.
That's right. I think Peter Dutton opened up the door when he said that he would hold another referendum for rural and regional areas if he's elected to the position of being government after the next election. The fact is that in a lot of these communities, these areas, you know what, Paul, they helicopter in Labor people and actually they then harvest the votes and put it towards where they want it. So in a lot of these communities, a lot of the Aboriginals didn't have a clue what they're voting on. They wouldn't have a clue what the voice was about. So they've actually gone in there, harvested the votes. They do it all at election time as well. The Aboriginal voting is rather poor, very poor actually. In Victoria, less than 10% actually turned out to vote. And in South Australia, you had about 70% that were actually registered to vote, and yet only just over 20% turns up to vote. So it is a big problem that you have. Albanese is just the contempt that he has for the people of Australia who clearly rejected his voice to Parliament to turn around and advocate to put this into communities because he has a mandate. To hell he's got a mandate. He's got absolutely nothing. And that's how arrogant this man is, to think that he's going to go in there and he's going to legislate for this. And I hope that the rest of the Greens acknowledge and what the people have said, and David Pocock, who carries the vote in the Senate, I hope he has the intestinal fortitude to stand up and recognise that the people of Australia have rejected this voice solely and they do not support any form of legislation.
Linda, you're going to tell me that, well, the Cook Islands, there's this one booth and they voted very strongly for it, and then there's the remote booth in the Northern Territory, but then we have the rest of the country that's made it very clear that they don't believe that this is the answer. Do you think that this is just a bit of paper speculation, or there is a case for the remote and regional voices?
Well, I think it's firstly very important to call out that Pauline Hanson's just made some pretty serious allegations there about corruption during the referendum, and in particular potentially against the AEC. And I really think it is important to correct the record there. This was a proper vote. There's never been any serious allegations against the AEC, and this is a really important independent electoral body. So let's just call this out for what it was, a very appropriately conducted legal referendum where people had their say.
Where did I mention the AEC? I didn't actually mention them at all.
You were talking about
made some allegations
harvesting.
There. I never even mentioned the AEC. I said that people fly in from the Labor Party and they actually harvest the votes. I didn't say the AEC at all. And if you're not aware of this, then you've been blinded to what's actually happening in some of these communities.
I'd also just really refute that, Pauline, but let's move on to the proper debate. It is the case that we know in the booth where there were Indigenous Australians, there were overwhelmingly strong support for the yes proposition. And of course, there's been for many years in Australia very strong bipartisan support for local and regional voices. The Prime Minister has, of course, alongside Minister Burney, said that they would go away and consult Indigenous Australians. I think what's really positive to come out of this referendum is that front of mind for all Australians, and where there was really strong support right across Australia was for closing the gap, was for taking what we know is this robust evidence about the very significant disadvantage that exists between Indigenous Australians and non-Indigenous Australians. In fact, in the closing the gap targets in areas like incarceration, we're seeing the disadvantage get worse, not get better. There was some very strong statements on every single bit of our parliament, from all our parliamentary representatives and political players, talking about the need to resolve this. So I hope that this kind of policy does stay front of mind for Australians. I think it's great we're talking about it tonight, and I hope that Australians can come together and try to provide some solutions, be that local and regional voices or other solutions. I think it's great that we're all talking about this, and it is really important that we all keep this very sharp focus on how we're going to close the gap in disadvantage between Indigenous Australians and non-Indigenous Australians.
All four of us are absolutely committed to that, and there's lots of different ways to it. But I tell you what, Holly, it's a fairly large set of stones if you have a national vote on the way to deal with those things, yet we might find a way around it. I could see that, again, I know that all the sort of the smart boffiny people think, oh, Peter Dutton this and Liberal Party that, but I tell you how normal people might react to it.
Absolutely. Sorry, you just dropped out for a second there. But look, to Linda's point, and I know she's City of Sydney, and they did all they could. They had banners all through the Sydney CBD, and the highest yes votes were actually recorded, as you made the point, in the ACT and the Teal seats, who all have the lowest Aboriginal and Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander populations across the country. So that is just a furphy for a start. And so it's absolutely ridiculous to say that somehow or other all of these very heavy Indigenous-based booths and Indigenous populations are, you know, Moree, you've been there, I used to live there, and they voted 80% no with a very high Indigenous population.
Correct.
So it's an absolute furphy. We still know that there is millions of dollars set aside in the budget for Makarrata, and we know that that was the second stage after The Voice. So there does need to be wholesale review, but I think the bigger issue here, it just continues to demonstrate how completely out of touch this government is. We have a cost of living crisis at the moment. People cannot afford to put food on their table. We have parents going out with meals so that they can feed their children. They don't know how they're going to pay the power bill or the rent or the mortgage. And this government is still looking for shiny new objects over in the corner to try and distract people. Well, we know that cost of living is the most important issue. It's the top issue, it's the second issue, it's the third, fourth, fifth, sixth and seventh issue for Australians. But this government is absolutely unable to connect with mainstream Australians and understand what they actually want their government to be focused on, and that's reducing inflation and reducing cost of living pressures.
Yeah, I mean, again, Pauline, I talk about this all the time because we always remember our history. We remember every grain of sand on the beach sometimes, which can be frustrating for the people who want to pretend, oh, look over here, look over here. Peter Malinauskas, when he was in the Sky News People's Forum going into the South Australian election, he dealt with cost of living by saying, look, there's actually a limit to what government could do, okay? So, yes, he talked about it as an issue, but he never pretended to offer himself as a solution. Labor offered themselves as a solution to cost of living, no asterisks, no if only this and only that and only welfare and only minimum wage. Remember the poster, we've shown you how many times, almost every night, that a Labor government will lower the cost of living. All of it's got worse. Petrol tax in particular is an area where they could do that tomorrow, still have a surplus, but of course they have no interest in doing that. Are you hearing anything at all about some sort of whiz-bang we get it moment coming out of Labor? Because I hear a lot of people inside the world of Labor, and yes, occasionally one or two do speak, who say, well, look, you know, frankly, there's a kink in the hose, it'll all calm down by the time we get to an election. Well, there's a lot of pain between now and an election, and people will remember how they feel tonight. Now, I get it. You've got to go to the White House, you've got to see Joe Biden. But could you imagine if it was a Liberal Prime Minister who's clinking glasses during a cost of living crisis like this, what the memes and tweets would have been all day today?
Paul, I don't see the Labor Party having any clear solutions to bring down the cost of living. The housing policy is a complete lie, and do you think that they can actually supply 30,000 homes in the next 5 years? They're kidding themselves, and especially when the $10 billion fund they put forward, and they're going to make interest off that if they actually do that. You know, electricity, they're pushing this net zero by 2050. It's not going to work. Cost of electricity has gone up even more so. It's actually tripled in just going on a few years ago. People are paying a lot more for the electricity. Electricity affects everything, Paul, whether it's the farming sector, whether it's the supermarkets, whether it's the trucks, everything, refrigeration. It all adds to the cost, and the billions of dollars they're putting into this has been nothing but an absolute lie to the Australian people of our 1%, if that, emissions, and we're actually importing from China, who has over 30% emissions compared to our 1%, and people are just going along with this. Absolute fools to keep going along this path of supporting this this net zero emissions, thinking that's saving the planet, we're actually destroying our own country, our standard of living, our way of life. Cost of living's going up. They've got nothing to rein it in, and I think that they're going to destroy this country. If they get another term in government, I think it's going to be too far beyond us being able to rein it back and help the people of Australia.
Linda, of course, you've been proudly part of a council that declared climate emergency. We've talked before about the absurdity of the Lord Mayor's position, which is you can have solar panels on your roof, but just don't have them on the side that anyone can see from the road, because that might, public amenity. So, geez, the planning part is hardly committed here. But again, one of the central things, and you, of course, have responsibility across local councils all over the country to advocate on their behalf. That's why you get to sit at National Cabinet. But we have a scenario where we have strong opinions in the city, but in the bush, it's where this stuff is being built. It's where this stuff in some ways is being forced. And we don't see some of the councils that are absolute about climate emergencies suggesting anything about electricity generation in their areas. Now, again, I'm not trying to verbal you here to suggest, is there any plan for Centennial Park to start to have 1 or 2 solar farms in it? But why is it only Mudgee that needs to have them, but not the areas that are pushing the policy that requires regional Australia to be fundamentally changed, while the northern beaches of Sydney or the eastern suburbs of Sydney, nothing changes for them?
I think it's a really reasonable point that those of us who live in cities would absolutely lean in and do whatever we can to make sure that we're contributing to energy generation. We had a motion at the last New South Wales Local Government Conference from beautiful Broken Hill Council about the need for there to be energy generation in the cities, and I proudly got up and spoke in support of that. And I support our regional communities, and particularly, of course, those councils that are working hard to try and understand where transmission and generation lines will go. We've advocated, in fact, very recently as part of the federal government's review of energy conducted by the National Energy Commissioner to ensure that there is a clearer national plan for where energy transmission and generation will go, that the Commonwealth Government overlay their biodiversity targets, they overlay the National Housing Accord, and they overlay agricultural land so that we can make sure we've got a better, clearer, place-based vision of where all these national targets fit together, so that local governments can plan for our areas and ensure that we're having beautiful, livable places, be they in the cities or in very remote areas or in the regions. So it is correct to say that every part of Australia has to play our part here, and there are some regions undergoing massive change with renewable energy, and we're leaning in to support them, but we need to understand how these things fit together better from our federal and state governments.
All right, Holly?
Linda, I have to say that is just so much rubbish. I cannot believe it. There were community batteries that were proposed and all this leaning in that the Teal seats wanted to do. I think it was North Sydney Council and Waverley Council who opposed community batteries being put in. Now, these things were going to be the size of a shipping container. They'd allocated some space. They were going to be painted with Indigenous art. But the Teal seats, the areas that you say will lean in, opposed community batteries. We also know when people are asked,
well, you can bash the Teal seats all you want, Holly, but,
No, I'm having a crack at the council. I'm coming to a few things, Linda, so I let you finish. So, secondly, when you go around and you say to people, do you support renewable energy? Everyone's like, yeah, sure, of course I want greener and I want cleaner air and this is all fantastic. How much are you prepared to pay for it? Oh, well, that's a different question. Absolutely nothing is the consistent answer. Now, if, Linda, you sit on National Cabinet, I understand the next one's the week commencing December 4, maybe you can have a chat to the Prime Minister and perhaps encourage his Labor Senate team, and I'd like to thank Senator Hanson for her support, but there have been a number of calls for an inquiry into transmission lines. We refer to it as Transmission Tuesday because I think we've brought it back 7 times to look at where transmission lines are going through, particularly agricultural land and rural and regional areas, but also into where they're going to affect Indigenous cultural heritage sites. But these inquiries have been now blocked 7 times by Labor, the Greens and Senator Pocock. So maybe when you're at National Cabinet, Linda, and you all want to talk about how much you're concerned about rural and regional councils, agricultural land and the metropolitan areas carrying their weight, perhaps you could do the rural and regional people the courtesy of supporting an inquiry so they can have their say about how much of their prime agricultural farming land is about to be bulldozed and taken over so transmission lines can go in whilst we rewire the nation. And in fact, Paul, we had estimates this week and they were talking about in one session the EPBC. And the EPBC
speak English, what's
is currently
that?
Where the well, it's currently, just so you know, it's where the nuclear prohibition moratorium is.
Right.
And we were hearing about how this acts. It's the Environmental Act, that it's thousands of pages, it's going through a review, it's very, very complex. And I made a suggestion, if someone would, familiar with Section 140A, Part 1, Part B, I think it was.
Now you're talking sexy.
We had a few words that they could remove. I know, I do my best for you. But they had 4 words for them that they could remove. A nuclear power plant. They could remove those words. We lift the moratorium and, hey, guess what? Small modular reactors can plug into our current grid. We do not need to destroy our rural and regional areas to rewire the nation at a cost of billions and billions and billions
well, don't
of
forget,
dollars. So
forget billions, it's trillions. Literally, it's trillions. Take a look at everything that the CSR wrote at some of the greening groups. All right, ladies, quick break. We're not Channel 2. Support the people who support us and back with this debate in a moment or two's time here. 15 minutes away from the late debate. Now, of course, at this point in time, we've had massive conversations about the Indigenous culture. We've had massive conversations about Middle East peace. Can we go about as local as we could possibly get? And let's talk to Linda Scott, to Pauline Hanson and to Holly Hughes about a school formal. Now, there is a plan for a school formal and 2 girls that are in a relationship. They would like to go to their school formal, but they go to a Catholic school. The Catholic school has said no because of their position when it comes to same-sex relationships. They should be able to go to the formal. Let's be honest here, okay? Now, no one's going to be having sex at the formal. No one's going to be pashing at the formal. God forbid some people are going to hold some hands. That is
not sure about that.
That is well. Okay, different formal than I went to, but still, all right. Which is, surely this is a scenario, Pauline, where again, right? I understand about forcing a church to marry people in the church, but the idea that the school says that 2 girls can't hold hands and go to the formal together, it seems to me to be ridiculous. Or am I just lost in a lefty haze?
No, Paul, I agree with you. I can't see any problem with it. You know, we've allowed same-sex marriage in Australia. That was voted by in a plebiscite by the Australian people. We actually said daily basis on our TV programs that we watch, whether it's on, you know, Facebook or all the kids, you know, it's part of life. It is part of life. So I think to deny these 2 girls to go to the formal, I think it's ridiculous. As you said, it's a formal, and I think they should have the right to actually go.
Yeah, I mean, again, right, we're not talking about the after party, we're not talking about all the other things, but it's like it always has, it just is, to me, Linda, very strange that, again, I'm not talking about forcing a priest to marry 2 blokes or 2 Sheilas. We're talking about 2 teenagers being able to go to a freaking formal. The Premier says that it should be the case. What do you think? Because I want you and Pauline on a unity ticket here.
People should be able to bring their whole selves to their school formal and to school and to work. And it is, of course, so fundamental that these 2 girls be able to come together to their school formal. I never thought I would see the day where Pauline Hanson and I were on a unity ticket about girls being able to go to their formal together. And yet here we are. This is a remarkable day.
And she's a lot more modern than you think.
We've reached that incredible level of strong public support for the idea that people as adults should be able to love who they love. So I hope the school changes their mind. I hope these young women can celebrate their formal, you know, with the person that they love.
Okay. Linda, could you repeat after me? I, Linda Scott, agree with Pauline Hanson.
I, Linda Scott, on this issue of marriage equality and on this issue of girls being able to go to their formal together, agree with Senator Pauline Hanson.
Pulling teeth, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Oh, God forbid there's common sense in the people we disagree with. All right, Holly, super fast. I want to get to other things here, right? But do we get a clean sweep here, Holly?
Look, absolutely. And I actually heard on radio this morning there was a mum rang up and said her daughter just wanted to go with one of her friends. They didn't have dates and they've been told they can't just go together. So it just seems to me all a bit silly.
Oh, no.
Well, I married the girl I took to my school formal and we have been together ever since. We didn't get married at the school formal. We've just been together since year 11. I know what a rock and roll lifestyle that I have. Love you, Shani. All right, now let's talk about development and potentially overdevelopment here. Now, we need more housing in Australia, but we certainly know that state government love the idea because of all of that extra stamp duty. And in New South Wales, they're saying they're actually going to come after councils that don't build enough housing because, again, Sky News People's Forum, it's good these things, pay attention because you get to remember the stuff during an election. Chris Minns said and pointed out that places like Bankstown have to have thousands of extra people, but Mossman only has to have a couple of hundred extra people in the next 10 years. Again, Linda, as local government here, you're going to have residents that are going to say, don't change my area, but then you're going to have a state government saying, unless you start building some units, we're going to penalise you. Where is the Goldilocks on this one?
Well, look, we've signed up to the National Housing Accord, as of course have the Commonwealth Government and all the states and territories, and that means a commitment to deliver 1.2 million new homes. And as part of that, we advocated successfully but very hard for an additional $500 million to support the local infrastructure, because there's nothing worse than building new homes that aren't connected to sewers, building new homes that don't have road access, building new homes that don't have playgrounds.
But if the Tiffany and Teal say no units in my area, then what happens? I'm pretty sure there's plenty of sewers in and around Wallara.
This is a really important national conversation. We do have a housing affordability crisis in this country, and as I travel around the country, there's rarely a local government area where I don't meet the mayor and they don't speak to me about the need for more homes in their area. This is not just in the cities, it is a really significant national issue, and we've got to have these conversations about ensuring that the homes are close to jobs, are close to other local infrastructure, but it also takes funding. It takes funding through developer contributions and through this federal funding, which we hope will be open in the next few months for councils to apply to build these new areas. And can I say, there's been this big debate in the New South Wales Parliament recently, and I'm hearing, some of the young Liberals are starting to say, oh, we do need development, people do need homes, and can I just welcome them on board? I've been talking about housing affordability at the City of Sydney for more than a decade.
You have, and I'm with you.
Opposed on this by my Lord Mayor, who often says it's not the responsibility of councils. Her and I disagree about that.
Let me squeeze in another opinion
opposed
here.
on this by the Liberals. So it's great. It's great to see more people coming together on this problem and trying to solve it.
All right, well, great filibustering, because I literally am out of time to have the other perspective. But the other issue here, immigration, right? If we're openly saying there's not enough houses, but we're going to bring in another 1.5 million people, guess what ends up happening? The demand starts to go up, the cost starts to go up, and then there starts to be problems where literally in Ipswich this week, one rental property had more than 100 people trying to look at it, all right? So this is an issue in every part of the country, and more people is going to add to it. See, I was able to channel my inner Pauline, my inner Holly, and as always, my inner Linda. Thank you one and all. Do appreciate it. Have a wonderful weekend. Love you all. We will talk to you all very soon. All right, quick break. Back with more 5 minutes away from the late debate. And hey, a shout out, by the way, on the new Sunday Showdown show, 7 p.m. Sunday. This bloke's turning up. Then there's Corey Bernardi at 8 o'clock. Then we back up again at 9 o'clock on Sunday. So make sure you check us out then too. That's our show for the week. Thank you very much for wherever you happen to be. May you have a wonderful weekend. Good luck to Erebus this weekend as a chance to be able to get even closer to getting the teams and Drivers' Championship in Supercars. You can watch it all on Fox Sports and on KO. The late debate is coming up next. Go Yankees, go Tigers, and enjoy your holiday, Matty.